What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Camper Report. Today, I got a guest that I have been a big fan of for the last few weeks. I discovered him through Twitter, and I just started watching him. I was like, I need to have this guy on. Chase Senior from Chat Sports. He covers the Niners, but he also covers the Eagles. So if you look up like Eagles chat sports or 49ers chat sports, he's the guy covering those two teams for obviously unless you've been living under a rock, most people should know what chat sports is. So, how are you doing today? What I forgot to ask you this backstage. I a
Yeah.
lot of times ask my guests this. What do I call you? Do you mind just being called Chase? Because I grew up in the South and a lot of times it was like Mr. this and Mrs. that. So just
Nah, man, I'm only 31. I don't think I need to be
okay.
called Mr. or anything other than my name for probably ever, if not for many, many years.
Yeah.
So I know there's a little bit of an age gap between you and me, but we're young enough where you can just call me Chase and it's all good. And
Okay.
I don't even want to be called anything else. I'm cool with this.
So, how are you doing today? Excited to talk Niners and really the rest of the
Sure.
NFL. We'll be going back and forth between the NFL and Niners. I guess tell them what you do. We'll have a topic of how you kind of came into the business of football in a second, but tell them where they can find you on
Yeah,
social media.
so it's a very kind of unique setup what our company does, and we'll get into, I guess, more of my background in a little bit. But I would say that Chat Sports is kind of a blend between ESPN and Barstool to the point where
Mhm.
we'll talk news, breaking news analysis, break some film down, but also at the same time, there's an element to what we do that's very interactive. And we try to be the voice of the fan, and we do these watch parties for game days where we try to make it the best place to be outside of being at the actual game. And we'll take down some beers on our live shows and really drive super chats and drive engagement and just chop it up with the fan bases. So that's where the ESPN part kind of blends with Barstool to a certain degree. And it's new age, it's digital. So we are a digital sports network that's based on YouTube. Our main Chat Sports YouTube channel has about 340,000 subscribers. And then on the 49ers report, we're approaching 90,000 subscribers, just surpassed 87K. And then on Philadelphia Eagles now, we just got past 50,000 subscribers. So to be the host of both of those channels, I know it sounds weird, but like my literal
Mhm.
job is to cover the NFL, NBA, college football. So I do really cover all 32 teams in the league. It just so happens that I do daily shows on the 49ers and Eagles, which works out well because of all the recent success that both organizations have had. But I grew up in Philly,
Mhm.
and then being able to kind of understand a different part of the country, a different fan base that's different than what Eagles fans bring to the table, yet still so passionate with historic organizations. It's been a blessing, an honor, and to do what I do every day, it's incredible. It's like a blend of TV, radio, podcasting, and digital. And I kind of always wanted to be the next Colin Cowherd or Scott Van
Yeah.
Pelt and Patrick. Those were the guys I grew up watching, Rich Eisen, because they had radio shows, but they also did TV work. And my path in my career has been on a very similar trajectory. So for it to all become a hybrid now with what I do covering the NFL, it's incredible.
Yeah, that's really cool. I know you kind of covered a lot of this, so we don't have to spend much time from this. But I was looking up your name on Google, kind of learn a little bit more about you, and I saw on I think it was LinkedIn, that you graduated from Temple University. What did you graduate with? Was it did you graduate with a sports broadcasting degree? Because for somebody that wants to get into that, I'm probably going to go to college for that, sports
Cool.
broadcasting. What did you graduate with? What was your degree, if you don't mind
Yeah.
sharing?
So I grew up in Westchester, Pennsylvania. We were talking backstage before the show. I was actually originally born in Littleton, Colorado. I know you're based out of Colorado. I was there less
Mhm.
than a year. And then my family and I moved to Westchester, which is a suburb right outside of Philadelphia, about 30, 45 minutes. And that's where I grew up my entire life. So I actually knew at like 5 years old, I wanted to get into sports broadcasting. The Phillies at the time had a
Mm,
legendary play-by-play announcer by the name of Harry Callis, and I fell in love with how he called games, how passionate he was, how he related to the fan, and was the voice of the fan. Like, he was the voice of summer for Philadelphia sports fans growing up. And before that, when we moved into my house at the time in Westchester, the first thing I did was turn on the TV, and the first channel that popped up was Comcast Sportsnet, which is now nationwide known as NBC Sports. For regional sports network there, it's NBC Sports Philadelphia. For the Niners, NBC Sports Bay Area covers them. Matt Mayoko is their lead guy. So I turned the TV on and I saw these people, anchors and reporters at games on set, talking about Philadelphia sports and sports in general. And then at that time, when I'm growing up, it's about 1996, when I'm about 4 years old, 5 years old at that point, into the early 2000s. ESPN and Sports Center is at the top of the game. So the
mm,
talent pool that they had on air was incredible, really, for a long time. And I think it's died off a little bit now for a multitude of reasons. But back then, that was when ESPN was a powerhouse. So I saw what they were all doing, and I wanted to be a professional athlete, but I knew I wasn't good enough.
mhm,
So I decided then, wanted to get into sports broadcasting. In high school, I was a sports anchor for our high school broadcast. And then I actually had to go to 3 different colleges because my grades weren't all that good coming out of high school. So I went to a community college for a semester. I went to Millersville for 2 semesters. That's in Lancaster, which is Amish country. And then my dream school
mhm.
was Temple University because I grew up watching their basketball program led by legendary head coach John Chaney. And I knew that they had a great sports broadcasting program. So I went there and I did everything I could just to get into the broadcasting industry and to get reps. I was a newspaper writer. I did 4 or 5 radio shows per week. I was an anchor and a reporter for the Temple television station. I interned at a local sports talk radio station, 97.5 The Fanatic, and NBC Sports Philadelphia, actually, which allowed me to fall in love with broadcasting. And then from there, just got my career start. And I've made all these stops: Springfield, Illinois for a couple of years, Scranton, Pennsylvania. And then I moved down here to Dallas for Chat Sports to cover the NFL, NBA, college football. And we sprinkled in some Major League Baseball as well. And yes, I studied
Nice,
broadcast
nice.
journalism, obviously, with all the experience that I had to answer your question.
Yeah, I mean, these days with YouTube and different things like that, like, you go to a job and you wanna intern there, and then for me, it's like, I'm blessed to be on YouTube, and from from when I was about 3, 4 years ago, when I was, like, 12 years old, I would watch these podcasts of people talking, and I'm like, that's I mean, I watch Chris Sims Unbuttoned all
Cool.
the time, and I'd be like, I would love to be like that, so I just started a YouTube channel, really wanted to get this thing going, and then, so if I go to intern somewhere, I can probably show them, the tape of me doing all of these shows and stuff like that. So definitely YouTube, the whole internet makes it a lot easier because back in your day, it definitely was a different time for sure
So
because
it's
YouTube
actually,
was very early. So,
yeah, no, it's funny that you say that because we're in 2023 now. I graduated high school in 2010, college in 2015, but actually my first job was for a digital sports network in Springfield, Illinois. That's the state capital, covering high
mhm,
school football. And at the time, Temple has still, and did then, one of the best broadcasting schools in the country. I mean, I got to do all of that covering Division 1 athletics in Market 4, if you want to judge it
mhm,
by television markets, because that was a bigger deal then. And everybody at the time would go to like a North Dakota or a Wyoming or in the middle of nowhere in Utah, Lubbock, Texas, right? And they would take these jobs with television stations and they would work their
right,
way up from sports reporter to sports director and then get to, another media market, go to a large city. And that would be the career path. For me, though, I noticed that the industry was going in a digital direction. So that's why I actually kind of
right,
took a little bit of a risk as compared to people back then, because I went digital. And at the time, nobody really did that. But I was like, this is kind of where everything is going. And you're right. YouTube was in its infancy then, of like videos popping off, but it wasn't personalities or YouTube channels like
yeah,
now.
right,
But my first job, I'm doing like, on air work. where I appeared on camera, but also sports radio. So I like combined those two. And then I worked at a local television station in Scranton, WNEP, and I got the on air television experience. And then I come here and I get back to where I wanted to get to, which was like
Mm,
in that digital sphere where I can share opinions and have my own platform. But now, like, the platform is completely different than it was back in 2015, 8 years ago, where now I can have a YouTube channel that blows up. You're starting one right now.
mhm.
You were talking about doing an interview with Grant Cohn, and I've seen you on that show once or twice. And I was like, Grant, look at what he's doing with his own face on his YouTube channel. So it's incredible
Yeah.
how the business has changed. But in broadcasting and in journalism, it's been all about evolving. And those who haven't
Mhm.
evolved are the ones who are left back. Those who continue to adapt and evolve are the ones who are flourishing right now.
That's very true. Yeah, I obviously we have some football to get to, so this is a super interesting conversation. We could go on for all day about
For sure.
this, but let's get to some of the comments. Before we do, though, you're talking about Scranton. Have you ever watched The Office? You
Of
probably
course.
have.
Of course. I
Yeah,
grew
yeah.
up in
That's one of
Pennsylvania.
my
I was in
favorite shows.
Scranton. So, yeah, there's a lot of recognizable spots from Scranton that were filmed in the intro. So anytime I tell people Scranton, it's like, "Have you seen The Office?" I'm like, "Yes, I have seen The Office."
Yeah, yeah. Um, Calvin's Hobbs, I'm assuming that's from the comic book, says almost to 500 subs. Good job. Thank you. Uh, Grandizer says, here we go. Thanks to Grandizer. He's a regular on the show. Thanks for hopping in. And then shout out to Steph49K. She is a really good podcast herself. I don't know if you've been on the show
I've been
before,
on the show.
but
She's awesome, and her Nick Bosa impersonations are
yeah, yeah.
incredible.
So shout out to her. If you haven't already, everyone go sub. But anyone who watches this show should be subscribed to her. Um, but let's move on though. Aaron Rodgers, earlier on today, I believe it was this morning, is out for the got so last it was sad because yesterday night he plays like 4 snaps or something like that, throws one pass, and then the biggest concern with Aaron Rodgers, and I said this going in, and it's the same with Russell Wilson last year. It's like you can have all these skill position players, but if the offensive line, especially with older quarterbacks who are not as mobile as they used to be, if the offensive line isn't there, they're not going to be successful because they're just older. They're not as mobile, like I said, as they used to be. And so the Jets offensive line, they have all these skill positions, but I don't wish injuries upon anyone, but I can't say I didn't see this coming because the offensive line let through a sack and he landed weird. I think the Achilles tear came off of a sack. I wasn't really watching that game, but I did see the replay. So, what are your what's next for the Jets at QB? And is this the last time Aaron Rodgers is going to play in the NFL? He's almost 40 years old. And I mean, man, he already was considering retirement. Now, this to me almost has to put a nail in the coffin for his career.
Yeah, we'll see. Tom Brady played until he was 45 years old, and he
Yeah.
did an amazing job of taking care of his body with nutrition, workouts, and just really mastering how to have longevity in the NFL. So I can't imagine that Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to come back, because having that as his final image in the NFL after just a couple of snaps with the new destination that he went to, considering all of the hype and the excitement that he had, it sounded as though he was kind of rejuvenated to a certain degree. All those years in Green Bay, and he goes to a change of scenery after the Packers didn't want him. And what is kind of a punch in the gut here
Mhm.
is, as an NFL fan, the Aaron Rodgers storyline with the New York Jets, I thought, was incredibly fascinating. He spends all those years in Green Bay, wins a Super Bowl, 4 MVPs, had a tremendous amount of success. He's probably the most gifted thrower of the football that I've ever seen. And then the Packers don't want him any longer. They move off of him for Jordan Love. He
Mhm.
goes to New York. And I wanted to see what he was going to be able to do with this team, because he brought coaches into the organization like Nathaniel Hackett as OC, who we worked with the Green Bay Packers. Robert Saleh is desperate to win right now because They want to streamline that rebuilding process to start winning games because he understands the shelf life as a coach isn't that long. He brings in Randall Cobb, Alan Lazard. Garrett Wilson is a stud, as we saw last night with the one-handed grab that he had on Tre'Davious White, and their defense is legitimately stacked with playmakers everywhere. So I really thought that in a wide open AFC East with the Patriots declining, I think the Bills have been regressing a little bit. Miami can put up a lot of points, but can they defend? They were going to become a very interesting team in that division. And I frankly love watching elite quarterback play. And Aaron
Right.
Rodgers is elite. He won back-to-back MVPs in 2020 and 2021. And I thought that he was going to be able to have a rebound season from a year ago. For that to all get thrown away after 3-4 plays, it sucks. I feel awful for Jets fans out there. They can't get a break. I mean, you think about the good quarterbacks that they've had, Mark Sanchez and Chad Pennington, since the turn of the century. That's a lot of bad and mediocre quarterback play. And they finally get their guy, and now they lose him. As for what's next, I think that they're going to give an opportunity, obviously, to Zach Wilson. Robert Saleh said he's their guy. Strong arm, solid athlete, but he telegraphs everything, as we saw with the pick last night. And
Mhm.
I just don't think he's ready for the high-level quarterbacking aspect of the position, nor do
I
I
don't
think
think he'll ever be
nor do I
ready.
think he'll ever get there.
Yeah.
So that's a concern. So let's see what Wilson could do over the next couple of weeks. Did the tutelage of Rodgers help him out? If not, they're going to have to scour the market for a veteran. Names being thrown out there like Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan. Maybe they go that direction. It just sucks for New York because they stacked up this team and they're
Yeah.
really, really talented. But the one thing that's held them back, including last year when they lost, I think, 5 to 7 straight games to end the season, bad quarterback play. And now they have questions at that position again.
Yeah, I mean, here's something I'll throw at you. Kirk Cousins. So with the clause now that the Jets, so Aaron Rodgers had to have played 65% of the snaps for the Packers to get a first round pick, right?
Right.
So the Jets will still have a first round pick for next year. And the Vikings just lost in kind of a not like they lost to the Buccaneers, and the Buccaneers, although they might be a little bit better than everything everyone thinks they will be this year, the Buccaneers, I really find it hard to believe that they're going to be super, super good this year. And the Vikings have a terrible defense. They have not a very good offensive line. My thing is they've been wanting to move off of Kirk Cousins for a while. Maybe if the Vikings aren't doing that great, which I don't think they will be by the deadline, the Jets still have that first round pick that should have gone to the Packers for Aaron Rodgers. My thing is I mean, there's no good veterans on the market. Carson
No.
Wentz, Cam Newton, Matt Ryan, who stunk last year, was not. I mean, he shouldn't be. I mean, you mentioned Philip Rivers. He hasn't played in over 2 years. You really think he's going to come back? So
No.
my thing is I could really see them making a run, a last ditch run at Kirk Cousins. I know that Robert Saleh was an understudy of Kyle Shanahan for a while. Kyle Shanahan, we all know, has been uh, kind of flirting with the possibility of Kirk Cousins. Now, I don't think Kyle Shanahan will get him, but maybe that rubbed off a little bit onto Robert Saleh and last ditch effort at the deadline. If, things aren't working out for both the Jets and the Vikings, I could see both of those sides being like, let's make a deal. We'll send you Kirk Cousins for a first round pick. The Vikings could be like, we know you guys are desperate. They could be like to the Jets, we know you guys are desperate, so send over a first round pick or even less. I mean, I don't think he's worth that much, but and we'll send him over. Again, both teams are not in a good position right now, and I could see that deal definitely going down. So
Yeah, what's crazy about the Vikings, they went like 11-0 in one score games last year, and that is very rarely a
yeah,
statistic and trend that carries over year to year. So they were one of the teams that I thought could have a little bit of a regression. They're 0-1. It's early. Can't lose week 1 to Tampa Bay. I think that team's going to suck, but
yeah,
it's interesting because, I don't know if they're going to be successful like they were last year, and they could have that drop off. And he's in the final year of his contract. So that would actually open up a pretty wild situation for New York because you have the uncertainty of Aaron Rodgers,
Mhm.
who signed that kind of restructured extension to stay there. And you don't know if he's going to retire or come back off that Achilles. And then you'd be trading for Kirk Cousins, who's in the final year of his contract. If he has success, Rodgers is still on the books. What happens then? So I see what you're saying there. I think that if the Jets are in a position where they're like hovering around 500 toward the deadline, maybe a couple of games over 500, if their defense carries them, I wonder if they make a move for a quarterback. It would be interesting because very rarely do we see a quarterback go to a team at the NFL trade deadline. But when playoff teams can sniff that they can potentially make a run, they make some desperate moves.
Yeah, for sure. Real quick before we move on, Cyrus Rubalcaba, he's a guy that I played basketball with in high school. Shout out to him. He says, "I love you, Ben." So, friend of the show. But let's move on. Cowboys beating the Giants, which we all know was an absolute to be honest, it's not even like the Cowboys offense played that good, but they still just absolutely wrecked the Giants. But anyways, the Cowboys beating the Giants or the Niners beating the Steelers, which one looked like the more convincing win in your opinion?
I would say the Niners win over the Steelers. I think Pittsburgh's more of a formidable opponent as compared to the New York Giants. I actually think that Pittsburgh's a team that could surprise some people this year. They're really good along the defensive line, solid in that secondary. They're always well coached by Mike Tomlin. Guy hasn't won less than 9 games in a season since he got hired. And I was impressed with what Kenny Pickett did down the stretch last year as Pittsburgh finished the year 7-2. They kind of caught fire there. I like George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Pat Freiermuth, Najee Harris. They have some good players. Their offensive line is not good, and the Niners were able to expose that. But I think what San Francisco did going on the road against a solid team that did win 9 games last year, that has some pieces that seems to be trending in the right direction, and San Francisco completely, utterly dominated them in all 3 phases. I was just impressed with how San Francisco threw the ball. I was impressed with how they ran the ball. I was impressed with their top tier talent and athleticism at the offensive skill positions. I was expecting that. They're awful along the offensive line on that right side. That's a massive, massive red flag. It can ruin your season. But on the defensive line, they're 2 groups deep. Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw are the best linebacking duo in the NFL. Watching Fred Warner play week in, week out is a joy, a pleasure. If you just do yourself a favor, I think, for people out there, sometimes like don't just watch the football, just watch Fred Warner move around. It's just different. And special teams, Jake Moody was really, really solid. So I just thought it was a complete effort for the Niners. And with the Cowboys, their defense looks incredible. That was the case last year. They have athletes. They're fast. They're physical. Really good along the defensive line. Micah Parsons is a stud. CD Lamb is really good, even though Brandon Ayuk is better. But the Giants more so kind of fumbled that game away early. And it was one of those games where the Giants were driving and then they commit some penalties and they turn it over. And then it's just a cumulative effect where everything went downhill and everything and every bounce went the Cowboys' way. They were good. I wasn't really too impressed with the offense. I still think Dak Prescott is mid, and I just think the Niners are the better team overall as compared to Dallas, and the Niners have also beaten the Cowboys twice in the playoffs back-to-back years.
Well, and I have 2 things, really. You said Dak Prescott was mid. I mean, this man had 24 attempts, only 143 yards passing. And so, I mean, it's like kind of reminded me of like the 2019, like Jimmy Garoppolo in the playoffs almost. Like the 49ers, like defense in that year was so good in the playoffs that Jimmy Garoppolo really didn't have to do much and make any hard downfield throws. And it looked very much the same with Dak Prescott in this game. Another thing is like, if you're comparing defenses between the Steelers and the Giants, I mean, the Giants defense, their cornerbacks were a huge question mark last year. This year, they drafted Deontay Banks out of Maryland, but he didn't seem, I don't even know if he's starting on that team yet. That secondary didn't seem that good. And then, I mean, their defense isn't great anyways. And then the Giants, a huge question mark was, they brought in a lot of receivers in the offseason, but none of those receivers are like super, super elite. Jalen Hyatt, what was another? Sterling Shepard coming back from injury.
Paris Campbell.
Paris Campbell. And so the biggest question mark with them was, they're almost going wide receiver by committee. Can these wide receivers step up? They really didn't look like that. Now, obviously it's week 1, but like you said, I mean, you said it perfectly. You almost said everything I was about to say. That game was over before it started. And when momentum's going one way, it's not good. So I just think that, I mean, the pressure, Micah Parsons, my gosh, he looks
Yeah.
legit.
Yeah, and the Giants'
But
offensive line is just dreadful.
it's
Yeah.
dreadful. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I honestly think the Cowboys defense is up there with the Niners, but I would trust Brock Purdy more than Dak Prescott. And that's just my opinion for right now. I mean, the way Brock Purdy, and we could maybe move on to this topic if you don't have anything else to say on this, but the way that Brock Purdy, do you want to move on to the next one if he's a top 10 quarterback,
You
or do you
carry the
still have
show,
more to
bro. I'm
say?
here. Yeah, you're good. You can
Okay.
segue.
Well, I'm just going to, because this is really the thing with me, is like the way he looked in week 1 off of a pretty major injury kind of warrants the fact that maybe he is a top 10 quarterback, even without an elite arm talent. It was impressive for sure. I saw a lot of great things, him scrambling out, making plays, him going through his reads. And then the only thing I would like to say is the longevity with Brock Purdy and the way that kept Tom Brady in the league for so long is that Tom Brady was able to kind of protect his body a little bit more, was able to throw it away. That's something that I think Brock Purdy, if he wants to be a top 10 quarterback in this league, that's something that Brock Purdy needs to kind of master, is more taking care of his body, not scrambling around as much, taking a loss instead of trying to make a play on every single play. But other than that, I think Brock Purdy is very close to the top 10. So my top 10. So my question to you is, can we say that Brock Purdy is a top 10 quarterback yet in this league?
I'm going to say not yet. I do
Yeah.
think that he's in the top half of quarterbacks in the NFL. And you just have to look at the body of work that we're kind of seeing. And when we talk about the top 10 quarterbacks, we have to talk about what they've done recently. And Brock Purdy's body of work now is stretching toward half of a football season. And while I'm not going to go top 10, he might be top 15. Like, I understand that Kyle Shanahan's calling the plays, and he's a great play designer. I like his system. He's very creative in finding ways for receivers to get open space. And then if you put the ball in between the numbers on target, there's room for them to run after the catch because of the play designs. And I understand that Purdy has Christian McCaffrey and Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle. But also at the same time, elite quarterbacks and good quarterbacks in this league, they're accurate, they're decisive, they throw with timing, touch, anticipation, they have a pocket feel. You have to have a little bit of special. And Brock Purdy checks all those boxes. And then his special is not size, it's not athleticism, but I do think that the improvisational way in which he plays with, where he can create out of structure, make plays downfield, and create for himself and others, is his kind of special ability. And when I was growing up, Tony Romo kind of invented the move for right-handed quarterbacks where you're at the top of your drop and you feel that pass rusher coming at your back, and then you spin out of the pocket and twirl out of there and make a throw, make a play downfield. Like, Brock Purdy's done a great job of that. He has this sense where he's going to allow that edge to get close to him, and right at the right moment, he spins out of the pocket as the defensive lineman over pursues, and he's able to either run or make a throw downfield. I also think that there's something to be said about his swagger and his confidence, and I do think that his teammates feed off of that. Like, for Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk to share an Instagram story of Purdy and the jersey name on the nameplate is him, like, they feel it too. And there's a track record of this. Fred Warner went on a podcast with Taylor Lewan last year.
Bussin' with the boys.
Yeah,
Was it?
exactly. It was
Yeah.
just a one-on-one though. Will Compton wasn't there. It was just Luan and Fred Warner. And Luan was like, I've heard from NFL people that Brock Purdy isn't all that good, something along those lines. And Fred Warner was like, dude, we kind of knew it like right away when he was on the practice squad where he started kind of dealing a little bit. And I think it's just a perfect combination of factors for him that he has this
Mhm.
head coach and this offense with these playmakers. I do want to see what happens when Purdy has to play from behind. I think that that's the next step. You know, the
Mhm.
Niners during that stretch last year after he replaced Jimmy Garoppolo and they went on that, 12-game winning streak to end the season, they didn't play from behind a lot. I think really it was only the Raiders game, but Purdy did come in for Jimmy Garoppolo when Garoppolo got hurt and the Niners were down and he led a comeback effort
Yeah.
against Miami. I just want to see how he plays in those types of instances when it gets a little bit tighter. But everything that I see right now from what I look for in a quarterback outside of the size, if you can get past that, he has a strong enough arm, but it's not elite. But the timing, anticipation, seeing the field, reading the defense, being decisive and getting the ball out quickly. Like that was the biggest thing that I think Trey Lance sometimes struggled
Mhm.
with. He just didn't process as fast. And when that happens, and especially in that Raiders game, that's what leads to sacks. Because if you're on a 3-step drop, the offensive line is not designed on that play to protect for a long time. And if you're indecisive and don't get the ball out quickly, you're going to get sacked. Whereas Purdy sees the read, hits it, rips it. So I think Kyle Shanahan really likes that and how he runs his offense. So not top 10, but is he in the top half of quarterbacks now? I think so. And for some analysts to say with how he played last year, he's 25 to 30, 32, that's a joke. I mean, he's 8-0 in games that he has started and finished so far in his NFL career.
Yeah.
And then this stat from Adam Schefter is pretty wild. He's the first quarterback in NFL history to win each of his first 6 career regular season starts while throwing at least 2 touchdown passes in each of those starts. He's also the first QB in NFL history with a passer rating of 95 or higher in his first 6 starts. So that's not a long season body of work, but that's a damn good start right now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why I'm so impressed with what he's been able to do.
Well, and now it's like Kyle Shanahan, you have the trust that he can learn the playbook and he can go through all your reads and he can get it to your guys. Now it's like you almost have to spend most of your time game planning on how to make him injured. And this is the most cliche thing because everyone, not make him injured, how to protect him from injuries. This is the most cliche thing. Everyone says it. But if George Kittle is a major force down the middle, right, against teams, I mean, teams are trying to stop Debo and Ayuk on the outside, and then Kittle running through the middle is almost impossible to stop, especially during the playoffs. It's hard to game plan for all three. But if Kittle's going to have to be blocking on the right side, which every time Brock Purdy stepped up and really and tried to throw the ball without Kittle, it's almost like he was always under pressure. And people are like, "Well, that's the best defensive end in the year best defense in the defensive end in the league in TJ Watt lining up over Colton McKivitz." But you're going to have to face that in the playoffs. Almost every team. I mean, the beauty of the NFL is we're getting more and more talented each team, especially on the defensive line. And so you're going to almost have to face that not every week, but most weeks you're going to have to face an elite defensive end who plays on the right side. So my thing is like, I don't know how it's going to happen. Either they trade for a guy, which I don't know. That's really hard to do at the deadline, trading for a top level right tackle at the deadline. But they need to somehow find ways to protect Purdy without having George Kittle blocking on the right side as well. And you saw in the Steelers game, like that was I guess we could go into the biggest concern, because I'm kind of going on a rant here. That's
No, you're
because
good.
Brock Purdy is kind of what we were talking about. So, but give us your players stocked up and down for week 1. And that was kind of a good segue, I guess, into biggest concern from the Niners' point of view from that Steelers game. And this is obviously the biggest concern on all of our minds is that right side, because you eventually are going to need George Kittle in the playoffs to run routes. And I just don't know how they can get him to run routes with also trying to protect Brock Purdy with Colton McKivitz, obviously a right tackle who isn't great. But the benefit of the doubt, Colton McKivitz, this was one of his first start, like I think it was like his fifth start, fourth start, something. So he could improve over the year. But I don't know. It's a concern for me. So
No, I agree with you. Look, the last 4 games of the regular season last year, George Kittle had 11 touchdowns.
yeah,
So he was on a heater with Purdy. And I think that when you have him running down the seam, and then you have Ayuk who has the route tree that he has, and then Debo is that guy that can operate behind the line of scrimmage or underneath on a bevy of routes, you're able to kind of attack the defense from sideline to sideline and then vertically as well. So it's more ideal for this offense to have Kittle running routes. Let him do
yeah,
what he does best and make plays downfield. When he's going down the numbers and he's going down the seam, he's tremendous. And him and Purdy had a great connection the last month of the season. Unfortunately, though, they might have to use him more as a blocker. And I thought that
hmm
the Niners offense played really well last year when they were using him as a pass catcher when they didn't need him in there to pass protect. But if the right side of the line continues to struggle, and Spencer Burford's a part of that too at right guard, he needs a big year too. If he could take that Aaron Banks type of leap from year 1 to year 2, that's huge, but didn't get off to a good start. And Colton McKivitz, he got dominated all day
yeah,
by TJ
so
Watt.
bad.
If that continues, you're going to need George Kittle in there to chip that edge rusher, because yesterday I was looking at the Niners schedule, and now that the tape is out, a lot of teams are going to attack San Francisco the
hmm
same way. You know, you have the Rams this week, so you might have Aaron Donald matched up on a couple of snaps with Spencer Burford. That's not good. And
Or
then
Colton
against
McKivitz. I mean, he can
or
play
or
both. So
exactly.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. Put him out there if you want to. The Giants have Kayvon Thibodeau and Isaiah Simmons. The Cardinals are the Cardinals. The Cowboys have Micah Parsons,
Yeah.
and there are multiple guys deep along that defensive line. You have to take on the Browns with Myles Garrett, 49ers with Daniil Hunter, Bengals with Trey Hendrickson, Jaguars with a lot of good pieces, Trayvon Walker. Bucks have some good edges. Seattle knows how to defend this team. Philadelphia, we know what happened in the NFC Championship game with
Yeah.
Hassan
Yeah.
Reddick. And then you have Ravens, good defense, Commanders, Montez Sweat, Chase Young, if he can ever stay healthy, Daron Payne, and then the Rams again. So, like, they're just going to load that side, the McKivitz and Burford side, if they
hmm
can. And San Francisco's going to have to counter adjust. So, those are my biggest concerns. And McKivitz and Burford, my stock down. Pretty much everybody else is kind of stock up for me.
Well, and another thing is like in that game against the Steelers when George Kittle wasn't blocking on that right side, it was almost always going to Christian McCaffrey. And that makes your offense like not only does it make it like easy to get to the quarterback, it also makes it super easy to read. It's almost like Trent Williams tipping plays last year. That was a huge story for a while.
Right.
It makes it really easy to telegraph what the 49ers are going to do. And so if you if you're a team looking at tape, you're like, okay, they're lining up with George Kittle in the slot. That means they and Brock Purdy is under center. That means they're most likely going to Christian McCaffrey, whatever. So it makes it very easy for teams to kind of like really know, okay, they're in this formation, so we have to play this and whatever. So it's going to be easy to just telegraph plays to the defense, and so that's another thing. That's a huge concern. So yeah.
Yeah, no, and I have faith that, Kyle Shanahan, with how creative he is as an offensive mind and the personnel that they have, they're going to find ways to game plan around that. But
hmm
I think that in the playoffs, San Francisco in that first half struggled with Seattle, feisty defense last year. They had a difficult time scoring points and moving the ball against Dallas. And then the Eagles pass rush was able to dominate their offensive line. And when it gets to that point in the season, on top of the fact that you're playing all these good edge rushers, they will continue time and time again to try to expose that weakness. And they're going to try to break your will with targeting the right side of the line of scrimmage. And the problem with having a weakness at right tackle, one, your backups aren't good. Two, you don't really have a swing tackle because you only have two guys in Jalen Moore and Matt Pryor who can
Jalen
only
Moore
play.
sucks.
Yeah. They can only play left or right tackle as well. And there are so many teams across the NFL who have offensive line problems. Like, you can't just oftentimes trade for a really good offensive
Right.
tackle. So
That's
that's why I
yeah.
was clamoring all off season, all draft. You have to shore up the offensive line. If you lose Mike McGlinchey, you
Yep.
can't rely on Colton McKivitz. You have to address that position. They didn't do it in free agency. And then in the draft, they're sitting there in the third round. There's a DeJuan Jones. There's a Blake
Yeah.
Freeland
How
out of
because you're a lot
BYU.
more connected to the NFL than me. How have those two guys been doing? Sorry to interrupt, but I'm
DeJuan Jones
interested
was
kind of.
really good in the preseason. He was excellent.
Okay.
Now, some people say he's not a scheme fit because he's 375 pounds. If
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
you watch him move, like, he's got quick feet. And Jordan
Right.
Mailata for the Philadelphia Eagles is 365 pounds, and they run some type of a similar offense as the Niners do. So if a guy's 375 and quick feet and he can defend some of the really good edge rushers, like, he can play in this league. I don't care about the system. Blake Freeland, not really sure how he's doing, but the point here being is, like, you drafted a kicker and Cam Latu over offensive line. What's more important, tight
Right.
end and kicker or offensive line? It's offensive line. That can make or
Yeah.
break your season.
Yeah, for sure. Real quick before we move on, how long can you do this show for? Because I know that you're a busy man, so
Yeah, I can give
just
you, like, until, top of the hour, like 12 more minutes.
okay, that's
Yeah,
fine. That's totally fine.
cool.
So if you want to, Grandizer, he did kind of share his story. So if you want to skip back, since we have a few more topics to get through that I really wanted to ask him. So real quick, if you want to quickly say again, what was your maybe inspiration growing up?
Yeah, guys growing up like Colin Cowherd, Scott Van Pelt, Dan Patrick, Rich Eisen, like, they all did a combination of TV and radio. Got respect for Bill Simmons, and then I kind of like having conversations like a Joe Rogan if you want to go outside of sports. So all those people.
Yeah.
Appreciate the
Yeah, and
question.
again, yeah, and then again, I mean, guys, if you want to, right after the show, I most likely will be doing show chapters in the description. So if you want to go watch that, the different topics over again, do that for sure. Does Chase Sr. have a prediction for who the 49ers rookie of the year, one on offense and one on defense, will be?
Rookie of the year.
Ronnie Bell, I think late in the year could.
See, like, they're deep enough at wide receiver where an
Yeah, that's
injury would
true.
have to happen for him to play well. Was he the rookie of the preseason? For sure. I love
Yes.
what he did. He looked like Debo Samuel Light, picking up yards after the catch, really tough with the ball in his hands. But which rookie is really going to play a role? Jake Moody could be
Exactly.
one. If he continues to
Yeah.
kick well, we could go Jake Moody because that's a pretty critical position for a win now team. I like Jalen Graham and D Winters and their futures. I like Jair Brown and his future. So those are players, maybe not now, but look out for them later.
Mhm. To quickly answer the Joey Fisher, I don't think he would have been our answer. He apparently wasn't very good in pass blocking, and I don't think he would have been able to start year one. So,
Yeah.
um,
Tough to
he
go from
says,
D2 to the NFL.
yeah, I grew up on AM sports radio during the day and overnight. Great times.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. And real quick to go back to
Same.
Joey Fisher, I remember when we first drafted him, I had a video of come out like a few months before the draft, and my brother had pointed out, hey, this is a guy that the 49ers should really draft. And I was like, so I looked him up, and I did a video like a few months before the draft, kind of breaking this player down for the Niners to draft. And then when they drafted him, my video was one of the only videos out there, and so it got like tons of views because the algorithm, I guess, people were looking up who is this guy. So that was I kind of got lucky with that player. But let's move on. Which team around the league was the most concerning in week one? We're going from the Niners to now. Which team was the most concerning in week one for you?
Yeah, Jets losing Aaron Rodgers stinks for them.
Yeah.
The New York Giants, you're now paying Daniel Jones $40 million, and I just don't think he moves the needle all that much. Are the Minnesota Vikings due for a regression? I think it's time to start talking about how Josh Allen's turning the football over way too much.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, as for like dreadful teams, the Steelers and Giants got crushed, but I think they'll at least be competitive. Arizona, I think, is going to be bad, but they hung tough with Washington. The weirdest result, I'll say, of week one was the Rams just stomping the Seahawks. I thought the Seahawks, and I still think that they can be a really quality team. I'm not a huge believer in Geno Smith, but they have a quality team. And for the Rams to go up there with a depleted roster and for Tutu Atwell and the rookie Nakua to go off like they did, that was the most surprising result. So the worst loss of the weekend, I would say, belongs to Seattle.
Mhm.
Chicago, I'm concerned about them because I'm not sure if Justin
Yeah.
Fields is it. He's now 5-21 as a starter. Hasn't had a good surrounding cast, but 5-21 is 5-21, and I worry about his future. So those were some concerning results, and then the Vikings losing to the Bucks at home.
You're talking about Justin Fields, and I go back to, like, Deshaun Watson, his last few years with the Texans, that roster was not really talented at all, especially the year that DeAndre Hopkins left, and I think he played 1 year without DeAndre Hopkins, and that team went 5-12, but Deshaun Watson was looking like an MVP candidate, even though that Texans team was not very good at all, and I know that he had a few years to develop, he was experienced, Deshaun Watson, but I think in this league, if you're a super, super talented quarterback, you're gonna overcome a few things. And I mean, that's totally true with Justin Fields. Can he become an elite passer? For me, it was the Chiefs. And I know this is the biggest concern on everyone's mind, but I will say that this team, they took a lot of risks this year. For one, they don't have that good left tackle. They really don't. And that was everyone's talking about the receivers, but their left tackle was not great either. And the offensive line I think took a slight step back with losing Orlando Brown. And then obviously you talk about the receivers. I mean, it's crazy to think that there's a very good possibility that the whole Chiefs season is riding on, I think, a 30-plus-year-old Travis Kelce. That's scary to think. The Chiefs took a lot of risks this year, and we were all thinking they're going to be great again, and they might be. They're going to definitely be a playoff team, I would think. But man, now that I look back at some of the holes that they have, it's very concerning because Travis Kelce, he's getting up there in age. If he gets injured one more time, it's like who knows? Who knows? So
Yeah, I'm not too concerned about Kansas City. I think when you have the combination of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid,
yeah.
you're in a really good spot. And Travis Kelce hadn't missed a game, I think, since his rookie year up until last week. Now, the offense certainly looked a lot different without him as compared to with him. And Patrick Mahomes didn't have his guy. I don't like what Kansas City has done the last couple of years at wide receiver. You lose Tyreek Hill. You don't really
Hmm.
replace him last year. It didn't hurt them. But now this year, you're relying on Kadarius Toney, and he had an awful debut. But that's a team, they're going to get it together. They won 14 games last year. They didn't lose a ton of pieces. I will say,
Hmm.
offensive line, a little bit of a concern. They made the trade for Orlando Brown a couple of years ago, didn't re sign him. And now at right tackle and along the offensive line, they're getting a little bit leaky. But when you have
Hmm.
Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, you're always going to be a player. Also, a concerning result, the Cincinnati Bengals getting their asses kicked by the
Yeah.
Cleveland
Yeah.
Browns. That's another one where I was like, huh, could the Bengals be due for a regression? Super Bowl 2 years ago, AFC Championship game last year. It's hard to have sustained success in this league.
Yeah, for sure. And especially, I mean, Joe Burrow getting injured. We'll see if that continues to nag him a little bit. Although that game was raining in Cleveland, and I saw something about like the Joe Burrow small hands thing, and I was like, that is actually very true. But I honestly wasn't surprised at how the Browns defense played and how they played in general, because I mean, the offense wasn't great, but they were still pretty good. I honestly didn't I expected this from the Browns. They're one of the more underrated teams, that they have a really, really talented supporting cast, and if Deshaun Watson even gets close to what he used to be, this team is a Super Bowl contender, and nobody's been talking about it because, last year their season was over before it even started because Deshaun Watson was not on the field for half. I mean, for more than half of the season, and Jacoby Brissett isn't the type of quarterback you can win with. So I honestly was not shocked that the Cleveland Browns came out and did what they did, because they really have a really good team and they just need to put it all together. And this seems like the year. So
Yeah, I like what they have. I just didn't expect them to just annihilate
yeah,
Cincinnati. Like
that's
Joe
true.
Burrow got benched, the offense was so bad. I think for the Browns, a big move was bringing in Jim Schwartz, really good defensive
Mhm.
coordinator, been in the league for a really long time. Their DC last year was not good at all. The defense stunk, but you have a lot of pieces on that defense, and you saw
Yeah.
physical, fast. You're right. If Deshaun Watson can ever get back to the form that he was at with the Texans prior to all the weirdness that happened with him, they can be a really good offense because the pieces are there. Offensive line is pretty solid. I think
They
Nick
were
Chubb's a
top 5
fantastic
last year
back.
when healthy, the offensive line. Go ahead.
Yeah, but Watson just needs to be more consistent because he just hasn't been nearly at that clip that he was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, for sure. Before we get out of here, Grandizer 12. Chase, are you sold on Commander Sam Howell? I don't know what it is, but uh I sense a lot of hype. Don't see him good this year. Your take?
Too
Um,
early to say. He started one game.
yeah,
I don't hate his athleticism. In the preseason, I thought he stuck a couple of throws down the teeth of the defense that were pretty good. They have some solid wide receivers too, and not a bad running game. Offensive line is just atrocious though, so he might not be able to show what he can do, but at UNC, he did some impressive things.
yeah, for sure. But guys, we have to get out of here. I mean, just a great guest. Thank you, Chase, for coming on, because this was one of the guys that when you responded back to my DM, I was like, let's go, because I was
Let's go.
so hyped for this. So thanks for coming on. Tell them again where they can find you. They probably all have heard of you, but if for any new viewers, tell us where you kind of are around on the internet these days. So where
Yeah,
you
so
can
you
connect.
can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Chase_senior. And then I'm on the 49ers Report by Chat Sports on YouTube, Eagles Now by Chat Sports on YouTube. And then you can catch me just on our Chat Sports channel as well, just kind of doing it all. So awesome to chop it up with you. You know, you got the thumbnail ready for the show. You got a nice little
Thank
backdrop
you.
there. Audio sounds good. Lighting's good. You're getting some guests and keep it up, man. Keep it up.
Yeah, thank you. And Tommy Huxley, if you want to go back and watch the show afterwards, I did get a little bit. I was a little bit late to post this stream, but yeah, it was a great show. So everyone, have a good rest of your night. I'll probably be back later on in the week on Friday with Lions Roar of the UK. I think they're called. They're a Lions content creators. We'll be talking some Lions, some NFL as well. Hold on, that is an alarm. Some Lions as well. So that should be a lot of fun. Guys, have a good rest of your night, and we'll see you guys later. Go Niners.
See ya.